The snow came sideways now, more like shards of glass than flakes, driven by a wind that howled through the broken towers of Winterfell. Jon's lungs burned with every breath, the air so cold it hurt to swallow, but he kept moving, boots slipping on blood-slick stone, Longclaw a dull weight in his frozen fingers. Whites pressed from all sides, clawing, biting, shrieking in their voiceless way. He cut one down, then another, the Valyrian steel biting through dead flesh and brittle bone as if through parchment. But for every corpse that fell, two more staggered forward. Their eyes, those cold, uncanny blue eyes, burned at him from every direction. "Fall back!" he shouted, though there was no one left here to hear him. The unsullied line at the gate was broken, the Dothraki screamers gone, their once proud Araks now clutched by dead hands. The trench fires that had burned so bright at the start of the night guttered low, smothered by snow and bodies. A horse crashed past him, half its flank torn away, its rider nothing but a lurching skeleton of armor and rotted flesh. Jon ducked beneath a swinging, frozen limb, drove Longclaw through its spine, and felt the jolt travel up his arm. He dragged the blade free, chest heaving. He had to get to the Godswood. Somewhere beyond the broken walls and drifting snow, Bran waited beneath the heart tree. The Night King was coming for him, had always been coming, and Jon knew in his bones that if he did not stand between them, there would be nothing left to save. "Keep moving," he muttered to himself, teeth chattering. "Keep bloody moving." Overhead, a deafening roar split the sky. Jon looked up in time to see Drogon dive past the shattered parapets. Black wings spread wide, a torrent of fire pouring from his maw. The flames washed over a wave of whites, turning them to ash and shadow, but the blizzard smothered the blaze almost as soon as it bloomed. The fire died, leaving only glowing embers and the faint outline of charred, half-standing corpses. "Daenerys," Jon breathed, though he could not see her atop the dragon's back. He pushed on, weaving between mounds of the dead northerners, free folk, unsullied, Dothraki, knights from the Vale, all jumbled together now, equal in their stillness. The sound of steel and screams grew muffled beneath the oppressive weight of snow and wind, as if the world itself were being buried alive. From the far wall came a crash, the groaning shriek of stone giving way. Jon turned to see a section of rampart collapse, sending men and whites tumbling together in a spray of ice and debris. The dead climbed out of the ruin almost at once. They never tire, they never stop. Ghost appeared at his side like a white shadow, muzzle stained red, fur matted with ice. The dire wolf lunged at a white that had risen too close, tearing its arm away in a single savage bite. Jon felt a flicker of warmth in his chest at the sight. "Good boy," he rasped. "Stay close." He spared one last glance at the keep, where the windows of the great hall glowed faintly with candlelight. Somewhere inside, Sansa and Tyrion waited in the crypts, with the never-meant-for-war dead. Somewhere in the darkness, Arya was moving like a whisper, a blade in the dark. Somewhere above, Daenerys and her dragons still fought. All of it meant nothing if he failed to reach Bran. Jon tightened his grip on Longclaw, the direwolf's pommel biting cold into his palm, and forced himself toward the broken archway that led to the inner ward and, beyond that, the Godswood. The wind rose, carrying with it the sound of distant horns and the faint, terrible shriek of a dragon in pain. The night seemed to close around him as he went. The sky was a maelstrom of snow and shadow, broken only by the red-orange flare of dragonfire and the sickly blue of something far colder. Daenerys Targaryen tasted blood on her tongue where she had bitten down against the cold. Even the heavy furs wrapped around her did little to keep the frost from gnawing at her bones. "Dracarys!" she screamed, voice ripped away by the wind. Drogon answered with a thunderous roar, banking hard to the left as he unleashed another river of flame. The world below became a writhing tapestry of light and dark, stones of Winterfell glowing white-hot, whites collapsing in heaps of cinders, the snow itself flashing into steam where the fire touched it. Yet for every patch of ground they cleared, the dead flowed back in, relentless, like black water filling a broken bowl. Daenerys' gloved hands clenched around the ridges of Drogon's neck. She could barely see the lines of her army anymore. The unsullied formations that had once stood in perfect order were scattered, fragmented islands amid the dead. The northern banners, Grey Direwolf, Flayed Man, Mockingbird, were trampled into the snow or burned to ash. "Where are you, Jon?" she whispered, the words lost to the wind. A shriek tore through the sky, a sound that seemed to claw at the inside of her skull. Drogon shuddered beneath her, his wings faltering for a heartbeat. The cold deepened, pressing in all around them. Viserion burst from the storm clouds above, a nightmare of torn wings and exposed bone, blue fire seeping from the cracks in his decayed scales. His eyes glowed like twin stars of an alien sky. He dove straight toward them, jaws opening in a howl of hungry cold. "Up!" Daenerys cried, tugging hard. Drogon surged skyward, the two dragons spiraling around one another in a deadly dance. Blue flame lanced past them, so close Daenerys felt the chill scour her cheeks like knives. Where it struck, Drogon's fire died instantly, snuffed as though it had never been. This is wrong, she thought wildly. Fire should not be afraid of cold. Below, Winterfell was a patchwork of fire and shadow, the gods would a dark smudge at its heart. Somewhere in there, Bran waited. Somewhere in there, Jon fought alone. We should have left, she thought, just for a heartbeat. We could have flown south, lived, fought another. Drogon roared again as Viserion's talons scraped along his flank, tearing scales and flesh. Daenerys slammed forward in the saddle, fingers clawing for purchase. She tasted smoke and cold mingled together, like ashes in snow. "Burn him," she hissed through her teeth. "Burn him, my love. Burn him to nothing." Drogon twisted, jaws gaping, fire gathering bright and hot in his throat. For a moment, the night itself seemed to recoil as the true heat of dragonflame pushed back the storm. Viserion did not flinch. He flew straight into the blaze, blue fire meeting red. The collision split the sky with a roar so loud Daenerys felt it in her bones. The air flashed white, then darkness rushed in to fill the void, the storm snapping back with renewed fury. When Daenerys blinked the spots from her eyes, the undead dragon was still there, his frostbitten wings beating steadily through the smoke, ice gathering along Drogon's black scales. "We are losing," she realized, with a clarity sharp as broken glass. "Even up here, in the sky that was once ours, we are losing." Arya's breath came quiet and controlled, the way Syrio had taught her years ago in the Red Keep, when death was still something distant and sharp, not this endless, smothering thing. She pressed her back against the cold stone of the corridor, the damp seeping through her leathers, and listened. The White's movements were erratic, jerky, a scrape of bone against stone, the rustle of torn cloth dragged along the floor. Their fingers scratched at the walls, leaving faint trails in the frost. They moved without pattern, without rhythm. There was no heartbeat to follow, no breath to count, no life at all. A shadow lurched into view at the far end of the hall, lit by the feeble glow of a dropped torch. Arya tensed, eyes narrowing. It had once been a man, she thought, from the way the armor still clung to its shoulders, though the face was half torn away now, jaw hanging crookedly. She waited until it drew level with her hiding place. Then she moved. Needle slid between ribs with the easy familiarity of long practice, though the corpse gave no gasp, no sound of pain. Arya tore the sword free as the thing collapsed, the Valyrian steel dagger already flashing toward the next shape that shambled into view. One after another, they fell, limbs twitching as they struggled to rise again. "You're not people," she whispered, more for herself than for them. "You're not anyone. You're just in the way." She stepped over the corpses, boots slipping slightly. The torch sputtered and went out, leaving only the faint blue glow of the night beyond the arrow slits. Somewhere above, she could hear dragons screaming, a sound she had once imagined as wondrous. Tonight it sounded like pain. Arya pressed on, moving through corridors she had known as a child, halls where she had run with Micah and chased cats. where Sansa had glided like a lady and Robb had strode with their father's confidence. Now every familiar corner held only shadows and the promise of teeth. The list had grown long over the years, then grown shorter again as names were crossed off in blood. Cersei Lannister, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant. The Night King had never been on it, but tonight he loomed larger than any of them. He is the end of all lists. She rounded a corner and almost ran into a column of wights wedged in the narrow hall, all trying to push forward at once, their bodies jammed together in grotesque stillness. Their heads turned as one, the motion slow and synchronized, blue eyes igniting in the dark. Arya froze. Another time, another place, fear might have held her there. But she remembered the Red Keep, remembered the howl of wildfire, the way sand had felt beneath her bare feet as she fled. She remembered the waif's blade slicing so close she could smell her own blood. She darted sideways, sprang up onto a half-collapsed table, then kicked off the wall. Her boots found purchase on a protruding stone. In an instant she was above the jammed wights, body twisting in a tight spin. The dagger flashed, severing a spine as she passed. Needle bit into a skull. She landed in the narrow space beyond them, breathless, and kept running. Bran, she thought, God's wood. She had seen his stillness tonight, the way he sat in that chair beneath the heart tree, eyes gone to some other place. He had looked so small and so far away. Jon had gone to protect him, but Jon was only one man. And Arya Stark had never been good at staying where she was told. The crypts of Winterfell had always smelled of earth and old stone, a cool refuge from the world above. Tonight the air was heavy with wax smoke and fear. The candles burned low, wax pooling on the carved wolves that guarded Stark forebears, their flickering light making the stone faces seem almost alive. Sansa pressed her back against the sarcophagus, feeling the carved lines of a solemn Stark face through her furs. Her fingers were numb despite the gloves. Tyrion's shoulder brushed hers. The two of them huddled behind their meager cover like children hiding from a storm. The shouting from above had faded to a dull murmur, as if the battle had retreated to some impossible distance. In its place had risen another sound. A faint grinding, the whisper of stone on stone, the soft patter of dust falling from disturbed lids. The dead of Winterfell were waking. Quite the family reunion, Tyrion muttered beside her, his voice strained but calm. He gripped a dragonglass dagger in one hand and a small knife in the other, as if either would matter against the legends that lay interred here. Sansa didn't answer. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat loud enough to drown thought. She had been afraid many times in her life, of Joffrey's cruelty, of Cersei's smile, of Ramsay's hands. But this fear was different. It was not merely for herself. She thought of Bran in the God's Wood, of Arya somewhere in the castle, of Jon out in the storm. She thought of the North that had bent the knee for her brother, then for her aunt by marriage, then for a dragon queen. She thought of all of them, all the living, pressed like kindling between the cold above and the deeper cold below. Something cracked loudly in the darkness. Tyrion flinched despite himself. They had to choose the crypts, he murmured. Of all the safe places in the world, they chose the one filled with corpses. It's what we had, Sansa said. Her voice sounded steady, which surprised her. It's what we've always had, the dead and the North. Dust fell from the lid of the nearest sarcophagus in a slow cascade. The stone shifted again, only a fraction of an inch, but enough. Fear spiked through the cluster of small folk and servants cowering nearby. A child began to whimper, quickly muffled by a mother's shaking hand. Sansa's fingers tightened around her own dragonglass dagger. Jon had pressed it into her palm before the battle, his eyes earnest. Just in case, he had said, as if that could ever be enough. The lid slid another inch. A bony hand, skin stretched tight and gray over bone, groped for purchase along the edge. Tyrion swallowed audibly. Do you suppose your ancestors will be more forgiving to you than mine would be to me? I imagine my father would quite enjoy the irony of strangling me from beyond the... Stop talking, Sansa said sharply. He did, to his credit. Something within her hardened. She had been the girl who prayed to songs, who believed knights would save her. Then she had been the victim over and over, a thing to be used or displayed. Now she was the Lady of Winterfell, and the dead of her house were clawing their way back into a world that had already taken so much from her. "No more," she whispered, barely aware she had spoken. She rose from behind the tomb, the hands scrabbled at the edge, fingers digging into grooves worn by centuries. The stone lid shifted once more, the gap widening. A face rose into view, a Stark long gone, eyes clouded, skin tight. Its mouth opened in a soundless snarl. Sansa drove the dragonglass dagger down with both hands, burying it in the thing's forehead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the body convulsed, limbs jerking, and collapsed back into stillness. A faint crack spread from the wound, threading across the stone like a spider's web. Sansa stared at her own trembling hands, then at the unmoving corpse. Tyrion exhaled softly behind her. "Well," he said, "that's one less dinner guest to worry about." She turned, meeting his eyes. "Help me," she said. "If they rise, we put them down. All of them, no matter whose name is carved on the stone." He nodded once, his face shadowed but sober. "As my lady commands." Above them, the storm raged on. The godswood was quieter than the rest of the castle, the thick blanket of snow underfoot absorbing the distant clash of arms and roar of dragons. The heart tree loomed overhead, its pale bark streaked with old, dried crimson, its carved face watching with the same calm sorrow it had worn for 1,000 years. Theon stood with his back to it, arrow nocked, bowstring drawn tight. His fingers had long since gone numb. He could not feel the string cutting into them, only the strain in his shoulders. His breath came in quick, sharp puffs that vanished almost as soon as they left his lips. "You're a good man," Bran had told him earlier, eyes distant, voice oddly gentle. "Thank you." Theon had not known what to say to that. He still didn't. The words hovered in his mind like a lantern in a dark room, illuminating all the corners he had tried to keep hidden. Winterfell's burned boys, the screams from the dungeons, the name Reek whispered like a curse and a prayer. He let the arrow fly. It took the leading white cleanly through the eye socket, driving it back into the snow. Another was already stepping over its twitching corpse, arms reaching. Theon grabbed another arrow, hands moving on instinct, firing, then another and another, the bowstring thrumming in a rhythm as steady as any heartbeat. They fell before him, soldiers in once fine mail, peasants in tattered wool, free folk with bits of bone braided into their hair. All of them stared with the same blue eyes, the same remorseless intent. They did not flinch when shot. They did not cry out. They simply advanced, stepping over their own dead as if they were stones in a shallow stream. "Theon," came Bran's voice from behind him, calm and distant, as if from a dream. "Not yet," Theon panted, drawing again. "I've got this." He didn't. Not truly. The arrows in the quiver were nearly gone. His muscles shook with exhaustion, his body still bearing scars from Ramsay's torments that screamed at the strain. But in this small circle of snow and red leaves, he had found something approaching clarity. He had run from Winterfell once, abandoning these people, this place. Tonight he stood between it and an ending written in ice. The last arrow left the bow. It took a white through the throat, snapping its head back, but the thing kept coming, hands already reaching. Theon dropped the bow, breath ragged, and snatched up a discarded spear from the snow. The whites hit him like a wave. He moved as best he could, driving the spear point into skulls and chests, sweeping it in broad arcs to knock them down. A sword scraped along his side, biting through leather. He barely felt it. All that mattered now was buying time. Time for what he did not know. For someone, for anyone. The line broke. They would reach Bran in moments. "Theon," Bran said again. Theon turned, chest heaving, and looked at the boy he had almost killed and then failed so many times. Bran's eyes were far away, gone into that strange gray world only he could see. But there was something soft in his expression now. Not pity, not judgment, acceptance, terror, and peace warred in Theon's chest. In the end, peace won. "Bran," he said, voice hoarse. I'm sorry. For all of it." "You're home," Bran said. "Where you belong." The words settled over Theon like snow. He tightened his hands on the spear, turned back toward the advancing whites, and ran forward to meet them. The gods would fell silent when he arrived, as if the air itself held its breath. The Night King moved with an unnerving stillness, each step deliberate, soundless on the snow. Frost spread where his feet touched, a delicate web of ice threading through the thin layer of red leaves beneath the heart tree. The horn-like ridges of his crown caught what little light remained, glinting faintly. At his feet lay Theon Greyjoy, twisted at an angle that no living spine could manage, broken spear clutched in white-knuckled hands. His chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath a ragged gasp that shivered with pain. The Night King regarded him for a heartbeat, head tilting slightly, as one might examine a faintly interesting insect. Then he stepped past without further notice. Theon was beneath his concern now. Bran sat waiting, as he had waited all night, hands resting lightly on the arms of his chair. Snow had gathered on his cloak and hair, but his eyes were as clear as the sky before a storm. "You found me," he said softly, as though greeting an expected guest. The Night King said nothing. He had no words for the living. Yet something in the way he moved, the way his gaze lingered on the carved face of the heart tree, suggested recognition. Not of Bran himself, perhaps, but of what he was. The last thread in a tapestry thousands of years in the weaving. A breath of wind stirred the red leaves. They whispered in a language too old for any human tongue, the faintest susurration of warning or farewell. The Night King raised his hand. The air grew colder still. Frost crept along the branches of the heart tree, forming delicate patterns over the ancient carved face, as if the wood itself were being bound in ice. Bran watched, unblinking, pupils wide. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. Bran was not entirely here. Part of him flew with ravens, swooping over the burning, freezing castle, seeing dragons locked in a deadly spiral in the storm-filled sky. Part of him drifted through the weirwood net, tasting distant summers and long-forgotten winters, the voices of dead kings and long-vanished children crying out warnings no one had heard. And part of him stood before this creature in a place beyond time, where the first men had carved faces into trees and sworn oaths they barely understood. "You were made to stop them," Bran said, though whether he spoke aloud or only in that silent place, he could not say. "And you chose to end us all instead." The Night King's expression did not change. Perhaps it could not, but an answering chill washed through Bran. A sense of bottomless depth, of a purpose so vast and simple it left no room for mercy or compromise. End the living, end the wheel, end all memory. Behind him, the wind shifted. Heavy footsteps pounded through the snow, labored breathing cutting through the stillness. Jon burst into the godswood, cloak torn, face flushed with cold and effort. Ghost was at his side, white fur marred by blood and shadow, a growl rumbling low in his throat. Jon skidded to a halt when he saw the scene before him. Bran beneath the heart tree, Theon broken in the snow, and the Night King standing between them like a shard of winter given shape. He had seen this figure from a distance, across fields and ramparts, through whirling snow and fire. Up close, he felt the cold like a physical blow, a pressure behind his eyes, a tightening in his chest. His breath steamed in frantic bursts. "Bran," Jon rasped. "I'm here." Bran's gaze flicked to him, and in that moment the strange distance faded. He was just Bran again, his brother in all the ways that mattered. "I know," Bran said. The Night King turned slowly to face Jon Snow. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. Jon felt every wound he had taken tonight, every bruise and cut, the ache in his sword arm, the rawness in his throat. The cold sank into him like a blade. But beneath it all there was a heat that had nothing to do with fire. Rage, grief, stubborn, stupid resolve. This thing had come to his home, to the place he had bled for and died for. It had slaughtered his people, desecrated his ancestors, turned the dead against the living. It wanted Bran, wanted the memory of the world wiped clean. Over my dead body, Jon thought grimly. Again, he lifted Longclaw. The Night King studied the blade, the faint reflection of his own inhuman face caught along its rippled surface. Valyrian steel, old as the Doom, forged in dragon flame and sorcery. One of the few things in the world that could hurt him. Jon moved first. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, Longclaw arcing toward the Night King's neck. The sword felt right in his hand, weight and balance familiar as breath. He had fought White Walkers before, watched the way dragonglass and steel cut them like glass. This time would be no different. The Night King caught the blade with his spear. Ice met Valyrian steel with a sound like worlds grinding together. Frost blossomed along Longclaw's length, creeping toward the hilt. Jon gritted his teeth, muscles straining, and shoved forward. The Night King's strength was monstrous. He barely shifted, only twisting his wrist slightly to deflect the blow. Jon stumbled past, snow spraying beneath his boots. Ghost lunged, jaws snapping at the Night King's leg. A backhanded sweep of an icy hand sent the dire wolf tumbling across the snow with a yelp. "Ghost!" Jon shouted, panic flaring. He had no time to check if the wolf rose again. The Night King was already turning, spear leveled. Jon threw himself to the side as the spear stabbed down, the tip carving a furrow through the snow where his chest had been a heartbeat before. Again he thought wildly, "Get up, move." He rolled to his feet, chest heaving, and swung Longclaw in a low arc, aiming for the creature's legs. The Night King leaped lightly over the strike, movement smooth and inhumanly precise. He spun, spear sweeping in a wide circle that forced Jon back. Every clash of steel and ice sent pain lancing up Jon's arm. Frost gnawed at the edge of his vision. His fingers were going numb on the hilt, grip slipping. "Jon!" Bran's voice cut through the haze. He risked a glance. Bran's face was pale, his eyes wide. There was something else there too. Not the distant, knowing calm Jon had grown used to, but something closer to fear. "You have to kill him," Bran said. "Now." "I'm trying," Jon thought, anger and desperation tangling. He lunged again, feinting to the left before slashing high. The Night King parried with almost casual ease, ice spear sliding along Longclaw's blade. Then he stepped in close. Jon had a moment to register how wrong that was. The cold pouring off the creature like a physical thing, the absence behind those blue eyes, before a hand like frozen stone closed around his wrist. Pain exploded through him. It was not the sharp, precise pain of a cut or bruise. It was something deeper, a biting cold that went straight to bone and marrow, freezing blood in his veins. Jon gasped, legs buckling. The Night King squeezed. Longclaw slipped from his hand, falling into the snow with a dull thud. Arya arrived just in time to see Longclaw leave Jon's grip. She had followed the trail of dead through the castle, the broken bodies in the courtyard, the scattered whites in the corridors, the crimson smear where Theon had made his stand. The cold had grown more intense with every step, her breath a constant ghost before her face. By the time she reached the Godswood, her fingers felt like they might snap if she flexed them too quickly. She saw the Night King first, silvery armor bright against the snow, spear of ice held with unnerving grace. Then Jon on one knee, clenched teeth visible in a face gone ashen. His hand hung at an odd angle, wrist still gripped by the Night King's claw-like fingers. Arya didn't think. She moved. She broke from the shadows in a blur, boots barely whispering against the snow. Years of training, of running and hiding and killing, distilled into a single instant. Faces flashed through her mind. Syrio, Jaqen, the waif, her father beneath the September's blade, her mother's last scream. All of it drove her forward. Her fingers tightened around the dagger's hilt. Valyrian steel, death for the dead. The Night King's back was turned. His attention was fixed on Jon, on the messy human struggle in his grasp. He did not move as Arya closed those last few steps, leaping, the world narrowing to the arc of her descent. She aimed for the space between his shoulders, where armor met pale, frozen flesh. "Haya!" The cry tore from her throat without permission. The Night King turned. He moved faster than she would have believed anything that big could move, hand releasing Jon's wrist as he spun. That icy grip closed around Arya's throat in midair, arresting her momentum as surely as if she had struck stone. Her feet kicked at empty air. The dagger slipped from her fingers, fell tumbling end over end. For a heartbeat, time stretched. She remembered that moment in the hall with Brienne, the way she had dropped the dagger from one hand to the other, the surprise in the knight's eyes. She tried it now, letting the hilt slip from her grip, fingers splayed. But the Night King's hand was around her neck, iron hard. Her other hand did not move fast enough. The dagger hit the snow at his feet. His face was inches from hers. There was nothing in it, no hatred, no pleasure, no recognition. The blue of his eyes swallowed her reflection whole. Cold spread from his fingers into her throat, down her spine, a terrible numbness creeping along her limbs. She clawed at his wrist, nails breaking on frozen skin. Her lungs burned. Spots danced at the edges of her vision. No, she thought with a fury that refused to die. Not here. Not like this. Jon roared. He hadn't meant to. The sound burst from him like something torn free. His injured hand throbbed with every heartbeat, the bones feeling cracked, maybe broken. He fumbled for Longclaw with his good hand, fingers closing around the familiar hilt. He surged to his feet and swung. The blade crashed against the Night King's side, biting a fraction into that frosted armor before catching. Ice cracked along the point of impact, spiderweb fractures spreading like veins. The Night King flinched. It was only the smallest shift, but Arya felt his grip loosen by a hair. She kicked, twisting with what little strength remained. Her boot connected with his knee. His stance shifted. The dagger lay in the snow between them, half buried. Her fingers brushed it as she fell. The Night King released her, turning to face Jon fully, as if the Stark girl were no longer worthy of his attention. Arya hit the ground hard, snow exploding around her. Pain jolted through her ribs. She clutched the dagger to her chest, sucking in a ragged breath. She pulled herself to her knees. The cold was inside her now, coiling in her lungs. But she was Arya Stark of Winterfell, and she did not stop. Jon barely registered the pain in his wrist anymore. All that existed was the Night King's face and the heavy weight of Longclaw in his hand. He struck again and again. The first blow glanced off the ice spear, sending shocks of cold up his arm. The second hammered against the Night King's chest, driving him back a step. The third he never finished. The Night King moved with that same eerie, unhurried precision, sidestepping Jon's latest swing and bringing the spear around in a smooth, flat arc. The shaft struck Jon's ribs, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending him staggering. He tried to recover, to bring Longclaw back up, but the spear reversed in a blur of motion, its point flashing toward him. Jon twisted, not fast enough. The ice drove through his chest just left of center, above the old scar from the daggers of his own men. There was no fiery pain, no gush of warmth. There was only the sudden, shocking absence of breath, the world narrowing to the white-shafted spear emerging from his back, glittering with frost. For a heartbeat, everything went quiet. Jon's fingers spasmed around Longclaw's hilt. The sword slipped from his grasp, falling into the snow once more. He stared down at the spear in his chest with a kind of vague disbelief, as if it belonged to someone else. Oh, he thought distantly. Again. His legs failed him. The Night King stepped closer, one hand still on the spear's haft. He watched Jon sink to his knees, head lolling forward. Frost spread from the wound outward, delicate patterns forming beneath Jon's skin beneath the torn leather and mail. His breath, when it came, was a faint mist. Behind them, Ghost's howl rose, long and broken, echoing through the godswood. It sounded like something dying. Jon! Arya's voice cracked as she tried to stand, dagger clutched in a bloodied hand. She slipped, fell back to one knee. Her limbs felt heavy, the cold in her chest spreading. Every breath burned. She had died once, she thought hazily, in Bravos. Or almost. It felt like that again, except there was no angry girl chasing her now. Only this vast, implacable winter. Bran watched. He had seen this before, in different shapes and shadows, glimpses of futures that had branched and twisted away. Some part of him had hoped this one would not come to pass, that Jon would reach the gods would sooner, or Arya would strike unseen, or the dragon's fire would be enough. But the past was written. The future was less so, yet some paths ran deeper than others. He watched Jon's eyes meet his over the Night King's shoulder. There was no fear in them now, only an exhausted kind of acceptance. "I failed," Jon's gaze said without words. Bran shook his head minutely. "No. You did all you could," Bran murmured. Whether Jon heard him, he could not say. The Night King's free hand rose, cold fingers brushing the side of Jon's face. Frost bloomed along the beard there, turning it white. Jon's eyelids fluttered. Somewhere far above, a dragon screamed. Daenerys saw it from the sky. Through the whirl of snow and smoke, the godswood was a pale circle, the heart tree's crimson branches stark against the white. She saw the faint glint of armor, the ghostly blue halo of the Night King's presence. And she saw Jon fall. For an instant, all sound left her. The wind, the dragon's roar, the hiss of Viserion's blue flame. It all dimmed, as if she were watching from underwater. No. She spurred Drogon downward, rage and grief igniting in her chest like wildfire. The dragon answered with a roar that shook the clouds, black wings folding as he plunged. The air screamed past them, cold and thin. Burn him, she thought, every fiber of her being focused on that one command. Burn him to ash and shadow. Let nothing of him remain. Below, as Jon's body sagged against the spear, the Night King's head turned, those cold blue eyes lifting toward the sky. Drogon's fire hit the godswood like a falling star. Daenerys screamed the word that had carried her across continents and through countless enemies. Dracarys. Flame poured from Drogon's gaping maw, a river of molten gold and orange that turned the night to day. The heat slapped against her face, searing the inside of her nose, drying the tears in her eyes before they could fall. The fire hammered down toward the Night King, toward the pale figure standing over Jon's fallen body, toward the heart tree and Bran and Arya scrambling weakly in the snow. For a heartbeat, she believed it would end here. All of it, the war, the winter, the long night that had stalked mankind since before the first stories were told, burned away in one terrible blaze. The flames hit something unseen and parted. They roared around an invisible barrier, flowing past the Night King like water around a stone, scorching the snow, blackening the outer branches of the heart tree. Heat washed over Bran, over Arya, over Jon's still form. But at the center, untouched, stood the creature of ice. The Night King looked up at Drogon, at Daenerys on his back, with the same empty calm he had bestowed on everything else tonight. She felt the cold of his gaze even through the heat of the fire. Drogon roared again, straining, forcing more flame from his burning lungs. The ground around the godswood became a field of molten slush and ash. The weirwood's outer leaves crumbled into charred fragments, swirling on the wind like blackened snow. Still the Night King did not burn. He lowered his hand. The fire guttered and died, dissipating into steam and smoke. Daenerys stared, chest heaving. The world blurred at the edges. Her hands shook on Drogon's neck ridges. Impossible. Below, the Night King looked down once more at Jon Snow. The spear was still rooted in Jon's chest. Frost had spread out from the wound, tracing delicate patterns across his skin beneath the torn leather and mail. His lips were pale. His eyes were closed. The Night King drew the spear free. There was no blood, only a faint crackle of ice. Jon's body toppled onto its back, limbs limp, Longclaw lying inches from his hand. The snow accepted him gently, as if in apology. For a moment he lay still. Then his fingers twitched. Bran felt it like a knife across his mind, the shift, the intrusion. The weirwood net shuddered, branches groaning, ancient faces contorting in silent agony. Something cold and vast pressed in at the edges of his awareness, not content with the dead it already commanded. No, he thought, trying to push back. Not him. The Night King raised both hands now, palms outward, fingers spread. The air itself seemed to thicken. Snow swirled upward in slow spirals. The dead forest of Winterfell's gods would quivered, branches rattling though there was no wind. Jon's chest rose with a shallow, unnatural breath. His eyes snapped open. The brown had gone from them. They glowed an eerie, glacial blue, reflections of the Night King's own. Frost rhymed his lashes. His face, still and slack, turned toward Bran, then toward Daenerys above, as if seeing both and neither. "Jon!" Arya whispered, voice cracking. She dragged herself forward on hands and knees, every muscle screaming, until she was only a few feet away. Her fingers reached out, hesitated, shaking. He looked at her. There was no recognition in those eyes. No warmth, no pain, no trace of the boy who had once gifted her needle or mussed her hair before going to the wall. Just an echo, a shadow. The Night King lowered his hands. Around the castle, the dead stirred. Those who had fallen in the last desperate hour. Northern soldiers, free folk, unsullied, men of the Vale, even a few scattered Lannister sellswards, rose where they lay, eyes igniting in that same horrible blue. The battlefield that had been so slowly, painfully cleared by dragonfire and steel repopulated itself in an instant. On the walls, an archer who had taken an arrow to the throat stood, clutching his ruined neck. In the courtyard, a Dothraki rider with half his head caved in staggered to his feet. In the crypts, beneath the earth, stone lids that had been forced shut now cracked again, more hands pushing upward. The living cried out in despair as they saw friends and brothers reborn as enemies. In the Godswood, Jon Snow rose. He moved stiffly at first, as if the joints of his body had forgotten how to work. Then, slowly, his balance returned. He bent, picked up Longclaw, and straightened, the Valyrian steel blade glinting dully in his hand. Daenerys watched from above, frozen as surely as if the Night King's hand were around her throat instead of Arya's. "No," she whispered. The word was ripped from her like something breaking. No, this was wrong, all wrong. She had crossed the world for this man, for what he represented, a better future, a family, a chance at a different kind of rule. She had pulled back her own claim to the throne for his, trusted him with the truth of her blood. Now he stood among the dead, eyes like cold stars. Drogon shifted beneath her, restless, uneasy. The bond between them quivered, full of confusion and the animal instinct to flee from what could not be fought. Below, the Night King turned from Jon to Bran. The trees shivered. The red eyes carved into the heart tree seemed to weep fresh lines of sap that froze before they could fall. Bran felt the ancient network of roots and memories recoil, shrinking from that terrible gaze. The Night King stepped forward. Behind him, Jon fell into place at his side, a pale shadow with a gray cloak and a wolf's sword, silent and obedient. Arya stared up at him, breath shallow. Her hand closed convulsively around the dagger's hilt, knuckles white. She could not bring herself to move. Killing the Night King had been one thing, a monster, a story. Killing Jon, she did not know if she could. Bran knew the choice would come soon. For her, for all of them. For now, he could only watch as the Night King came closer, frost creeping along the roots of the heart tree, up its trunk, over its carved face, sealing the weeping red in a prison of ice. Somewhere deep within the wood and the stone and the snow, something ancient screamed. The long night had truly begun. The heat from Drogon's fire and the Night King's cold met in the Godswood, creating a world of steam and glare. Snow hissed into slush, then froze again in jagged layers. The air tasted of charcoal and metal and something older, bitter as forgotten oaths. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, his breath frosting in front of him. The roots coiled around the base of his chair like pale, frozen serpents. He could feel the tree screaming. In no tongue men knew, but through the shudder of its fibers, the tightening of sap that was turning to crystal in its veins. The Night King stepped closer, each movement deliberate. Frost spread beneath his feet, reaching for Bran's wheels, for the roots, for the carved face in the trunk whose red eyes now gleamed behind a veil of ice. Jon stood beside him, Longclaw held loosely in one hand. His cloak hung heavy with frost, his curls rimed with white. The blue fire in his eyes reflected the pale glow in the Night King's, but there was no recognition of the boy who had once joked stiffly in the yard, who had stood shivering on the day they found direwolf pups in the snow. "Jon," Arya croaked. Her throat still burned where the Night King's fingers had closed around it. Every breath scraped. She dragged herself forward through the churned snow, fingers numb around the dagger's hilt. The Valyrian steel felt colder than ever, a thin line of midnight in a world going white. He didn't turn. The Night King lifted his hand and laid it on Bran's brow. Bran had been touched by that hand once before, in another vision, another time. Then it had been a brand, a mark that let the Night King find him wherever he hid. Now it was something worse, a hook driven deep into the heart of the weirwood net. Cold pierced him deeper than bone. It reached back through his memories, through the threads of time he had walked so many times. The long hall of Winterfell filled with candles, his father's stern face softening, Hodder's broad back, the cave of the three-eyed raven, the green glimmer of children not quite human. Ice formed along those pathways, choking the living green into brittle gray. Bran gasped, his hands clenching on the arms of his chair. His eyes rolled back, then snapped forward again, wide and white. The Night King's face remained impassive, yet Bran felt the pressure of his will, vast and simple, trying to force its way through the cracks in the old magic. Not content to erase memory from the world, he meant to take it, twist it, freeze it into a monument of silence. A blast of hot air swept the grove. Drogon swooped low, teeth bared, wings beating great gusts of wind that scattered snow and embers alike. The force of his passage knocked Arya sideways, sent loose branches tumbling. Daenerys clung to the saddle, hair whipping across her face, eyes locked on the blue figure in the clearing. She saw Jon beside him. Her grip tightened convulsively. For a heartbeat, the world split. The gods would below, the man she had loved standing among monsters, the boy in the chair who held the world's stories in his mind. Fire swelled in Drogon's throat, begging for release. If she burned them, it might end here. The Night King Jon Bran, the heart of the magic that had nearly broken the world. One scream of dragon flame, and Winter would lose its spearhead. Her chest hurt. Drogon faltered. The Night King lifted his gaze, meeting hers across the distance. The cold that flowed from that look was not the numbness of winter wind. It was a clean, absolute void. No mercy, no compromise. Beyond it waited only oblivion. He tightened his hand on Bran's head. The weirwood behind Bran crackled as ice raced across its carved features, sealing bloody sap behind a translucent shell. Bran gave a low, broken sound, more vibration than voice, and went slack in his chair, eyes going distant and pale. Daenerys could not breathe. "Fly," she whispered hoarsely. "Fly." Drogon banked away, claws tearing furrows in the snow as he rose. He roared, a sound of rage and thwarted instinct, but he obeyed, wings beating hard as he dragged them skyward. Blue fire lanced past them from the edge of the Godswood where Viserion had appeared, the undead dragon's torn wings churning the storm. Heat vanished as they climbed back into the blizzard. The Godswood fell away beneath them, a circle of scarred white and black and red, growing smaller by the heartbeat. Jon never looked up. By the time the sky began to pale behind the curtain of snow, Winterfell was gone from sight. Not gone in truth. The towers still jutted from the horizon, black against gray, but the storm wrapped the castle in a shroud so thick it might as well have sunk beneath the earth. Sansa did not look back. Her horse's breath steamed in the air, hooves crunching through the crusted snow. The animal was tired. They all were. Men limped alongside wagons piled with what little could be snatched in the chaos. Blankets, sacks of grain, a few battered chests. Women clutched children wrapped in too thin cloaks, cheeks reddened by the cold. A boy no older than Rickon had been walked with a blood-stained bandage around his thigh, leaning on a stick. They had left so many behind. Brienne rode beside Sansa, armor dulled by frost, cloak whipping around her. Her sword rested bare across her lap, one gauntlet hand near the hilt, eyes scanning the tree line for the first hint of movement. Podrick's nose was red, hair dusted with white. He stayed close to Brienne's other side, jaw set, trying not to show the way his teeth chattered. Tyrion trudged in the ruts left by Sansa's horse, boots soaked through, his legs burning with effort. His breath came harsh and uneven. Snowflakes clung to his beard, melting and refreezing in a pattern that might have been comical in another life. Davos kept pace at his side, cloak pulled tight around his shoulders, gloved hands red at the knuckles. The old smuggler's eyes were on the people, counting without meaning to, measuring who could keep up, who was lagging, who might fall and not rise again. "How many did we save?" Tyrion asked at last, voice hoarse. "Enough that you're still asking," Davos replied. "Not enough that it matters." Tyrion gave a grim, humorless huff. "I suppose that's the only answer there ever is." A scream cut through the wind. Reflex drew Brienne's sword before the thought formed. The line rippled as people stumbled aside. A horse reared, neighing in terror. Sansa's heart lurched into her throat. But it wasn't the dead. A wagon near the center of the column had struck a buried rock. One wheel splintered, tipping the cart at a sudden angle. A woman tumbled from the back, landing hard on the packed snow with a cry. A child sprawled after her, wailing. The driver fought to right the wagon, but the broken wheel spun uselessly. Sansa reined in. "Stop!" she called, fighting to keep her voice from shaking. "Stop the line!" The words passed back, muffled but firm. The column ground to a halt with a clatter of hooves and creak of overloaded axles. For a moment, the only sound was the moan of the wind. "Get them moving," Brienne urged quietly. If the dead reach us now, we're finished anyway," Sansa said. "Help the woman up. Unhitch the horses from that cart. We can't carry everything, but we can carry people." Brienne studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded and wheeled her horse around, shouting orders. Podrick slid from his saddle to help lift the woman, muttering reassurances. Tyrion stepped closer to Sansa's stirrup. "You're thinking like a queen," he observed softly. She kept her gaze on the broken wagon. "There is no queen in the north anymore," she said. "There's only whoever is left alive to bury the dead." "And yet," Tyrion said, "they look to you." It was true. The eyes that turned their way were hollow with exhaustion, rimmed with red, but there was a glimmer there she recognized. A stubborn, clinging hope, brittle as thin ice and just as liable to break. "They have lost everything. They won't lose you if they can help it." Sansa swallowed. The air stung her lungs. "Then we lead them," she said, "as long as there is somewhere to go." Brienne returned, breath steaming. "The horses are free," she reported. "We've hitched the woman and her children to empty saddles. We had to leave half the load behind." "Food?" Davos asked. "Half food," Brienne said. "Half other things." People didn't have time to choose. Sansa nodded once, sharply. "Move," she said, raising her voice. "We make for Moat Cailin. We don't stop unless someone falls. If they do, we pick them up and keep going." She did not add, "because once the dead leave Winterfell, they will move faster than we can." The column lurched back into motion, the sound of shuffling boots and creaking leather swallowed quickly by the deepening storm. The north behind them was vanishing, swallowed by white. Sansa kept her eyes ahead. Winterfell did not burn. It froze. The fires that had once licked its walls were now trapped beneath layers of glassy ice, their last embers strangled. The banners of House Stark, limp and tattered, were stiff with frost, their gray direwolves barely visible beneath the rime. The snow that fell now did not bury the castle. It became part of it, binding stone and bone together in a single white mass. In the courtyards, the dead rose. They shuddered, jerked, pushed themselves upright on stiff limbs. Knights in splintered armor, their helms crushed, skulls exposed. Peasants in patched wool, faces torn, fingers broken. The unsullied with their perfect posture twisted into grotesque angles, spears still clutched in ruined hands. They stood, one by one, eyes flaring to life with that hideous blue. On the battlements, the Night King watched. Snow gathered on his shoulders, on the cruel points of his crown. The cold did not touch him. It flowed from him. Beside him, Jon stood as still as a carved statue. His chest did not move with breath. The hole in his leathers, where the spear had entered, rhymed with frost. From this height, the godswood was a scar, a dark circle of char and ice. The heart tree's once vivid red, a muted smear beneath a translucent shell. Bran sat beneath it still, encased in a ring of frost that wrapped his chair to the roots. His eyes were open but unfocused, reflecting not the storm above but something far beyond. The Night King turned his head, as if listening to music only he could hear. Far to the north, beyond the now shattered wall, dead villages lay half-buried in snow. In their houses, the frozen corpses shivered and stood, answering the silent call. At the castles along the wall, the fallen of the Night's Watch rose where they had fallen, black cloaks stiff as boards. In the haunted forest, dire wolves and bears and elk and owls, all slain in the long march south, climbed from their resting places with eyes like chips of ice. To the east, at last hearth, charred timbers creaked as bodies untangled themselves from the grotesque spiral the Night King's vanguard had left behind. To the west, at Deepwood Moat, arrows that had once flown to hold the line now protruded from undead throats and eyes, their bare-bannered defenders joining the silent ranks. The north woke to itself, but it did not wake as men remembered it. The Night King raised one arm. Below, the army obeyed. Columns formed with eerie precision, not in the drilled ranks of men but in a tide that still managed order. Whites flowed through broken gates and over toppled walls, pouring out into the world beyond Winterfell's ruined perimeter. They left no footprints. The snow closed behind them as if they had never passed. At their head strode giants, their massive bodies stitched with new scars, eyes burning a colder shade of blue. Among them lumbered dead bears, their fur clotted with ice, jaws hanging open in soundless roars. Packs of undead dire wolves loped through their legs, pale shadows against the white. The army split like a river meeting stone. One great branch turned east, toward the Dread Fort and the White Knife, toward White Harbor and the sea. Another veered west, toward the Bar Rollins and the stony shores beyond. The central tide flowed south, straight down the King's Road, toward Moat Cailin and the Neck. The Night King's gaze followed that central current. His purpose remained unspoken but unmistakable. He would cut the world in two. Once the bottleneck of the north fell, there would be nothing to slow the dead from spilling into the fertile lands of the south. Beside him, Jon stirred. It was the slightest movement. A shift of his shoulders, the tightening of fingers around Longclaw's hilt. His face remained expressionless, eyes the same unearthly blue. But somewhere in the deep quiet of his body, something else pushed. He saw, just for an instant, another Winterfell. A courtyard full of banners snapping in bright, cold air. The ring of practiced swords, Robb's laugh. His father's hand on his shoulder. The warmth of Ghost's fur beneath his fingers. The memory flickered, sharp and painful. Then the cold surged, a tide of silence that swallowed it whole. The Night King did not look at him. Yet Jon felt the pressure of his will like a weight on his chest, forcing him back into stillness. He obeyed. Bran could not move. His fingers were fixed to the wooden arms of the chair, ice sealing skin to grain. He could not feel the bite of cold anymore, only a numbness that had long since passed from pain into something quieter. Snow gathered in his hair, on his lashes, melting only when the faint heat of his skin rebelled, then freezing again at once. But he could see. He had always seen more than the world in front of him. Backward, forward, sideways through the tangled knot of time. The weirwood net had been a forest of whispers, each tree a voice, each root a path. He had walked those paths, learning to step lightly so as not to disturb what should be left untouched. Now the forest was full of screams. He saw Carhold as the sunless day deepened into something colder than night. The Karstarks had held out longer than some, their walls thick, their stores of food deep. But food did not matter when the river beside their keep froze solid in a single hour, when the sound of cracking ice drowned out the cries of sentries. The dead climbed that ice as easily as stairs. He saw men and women on the walls, longbows in hand, fingers fumbling to knock arrows as their tips frosted. The first volleys fell true, dropping wights by the dozens. But the fallen rose again, pulling themselves forward on shattered limbs, clambering over each other in grotesque piles. When the giants came, the gate held for less than a minute. Bran flinched as the wooden beams snapped. The sound echoed somewhere in his own ribs. He saw Last Hearth, the Umber Castle already a place of horror even before the battle, its hall decorated with the twisted spiral of limbs men had found and burned. Now those charred limbs twitched, crawled, dragged themselves across soot-stained stone. Children who had cowered in the cellars gasped as the dead, who had once been their kin, reached for them with blackened fingers. He saw Bear Island, its cliffs lashed by a gray sea. The Mormont ships had sailed south before the worst of the winter hit, carrying what remained of the house's women and girls. Those who stayed behind had sworn to hold as long as they could. They died with axes in hand, roaring defiance in voices that grew hoarse and then silent. The dead came up from the sea as well as down from the woods, dragging themselves from the surf, eyes glowing beneath mats of kelp and ice. All of them rose. The weirwoods in those places shuddered as the dead passed. Once, their faces had watched over the living, over oaths sworn and broken. Now frost climbed their trunks, filling carved mouths with silence, sealing eyes in milky blindness. Bran tried to pull away, to close his mind, to let the visions fade. The Night King's touch at his brow bound him as surely as the ice around his limbs. The dead kings will coiled around the roots of the weirwood net, strangling, directing. It did not understand nuance or choice. It had a single command: end. And yet, beneath that crushing cold, Bran felt something else. The trees remembered. Their memories were slower than a man's, deeper. They moved in measures of centuries, not heartbeats. They had seen the first long night, the making of the Night King, the breaking of packs and the burning of groves. They had watched men forget their own crimes and rewrite their stories. Now, as ice crept along their veins, some of them resisted. Tiny pulses of green flickered in Bran's mind, stubborn as weeds pushing through stone. On Skagos, where men had always been half-wild, a weirwood clung to life in a crevasse that the storm could not reach. Far to the south, in the neck, trees grew where the water never fully froze, their roots tangled with those of willows and reeds. On the Isle of Faces, the greatest concentration of carved faces anywhere in the world, the weirwood stirred as if from a long sleep. The Night King felt it too. Bran sensed his attention shift, like a predator scenting prey at the edge of its vision. The cold tightened around Bran's mind. The visions of the North's fall sharpened, grew more brutal, as if the Night King meant to drown him in them. The boy whose legs no longer worked, who could not lift a sword, became instead the vessel in which all the world's endings were collected. Bran gritted his teeth. He searched, not back as he might have once, to days when his family was whole, but forward and outward, along those faint green threads. Somewhere beyond the reach of this winter, there had to be a way to sever the Night King's grip, to turn memory itself into a weapon. His eyes reflected the storm above, and something else. The storm chased them. Snow lashed Daenerys' face, stinging her skin where the wind had torn strands of hair loose from her braids. Her fingers, even in their thick gloves, ached from gripping Drogon's scales. The dragon's wings fought the weight of the air, each downstroke a labor. His roar had grown hoarser, steam pouring from flared nostrils with every breath. Behind them, the night glowed faintly where Winterfell burned and froze, a blurred smear of orange and blue that grew smaller with each heartbeat. Faster, Daenerys urged, though she knew Drogon could go no faster. "Please." Viserion's cry threaded through the storm, thin but piercing. Daenerys risked a glance over her shoulder. For a moment, she saw him, a pale shape cutting through the dark, holes in his wings edged with frost, blue fire leaking from the cracks in his ribs like light through a broken lantern. He was gaining. "Left!" she shouted. "Now!" Drogon banked sharply. The ground below them tilted, resolving into a patchwork of snow-covered fields and black lines of frozen streams. A handful of torches flickered near a cluster of low buildings, a farmstead perhaps. Daenerys clenched her jaw. If the dead had outriders this far south already, blue fire carved a path through the storm where they had just been. The air turned brittle. Ice crystals formed instantly, hanging glittering in the darkness before falling like shattered glass. Drogon snarled, banking again, climbing, trading speed for height. Daenerys' stomach lurched. Her world contracted to the feel of scales beneath her fingers, the sound of labored wing beats, the intermittent glimpse of Viserion behind them. She should turn and fight. That was what the stories said, to face the enemy head-on, to go out in a blaze of glory rather than slink away into the dark. A dragon does not flee, but she was not alone. On Drogon's back with her were the last hopes of whatever remained of her command. A handful of Unsullied clinging to harness and saddle straps, an injured Dothraki bloodrider murmuring a prayer in a language older than the common tongue, Missandei swaying with closed eyes as if in silent supplication. If she died here, they died with her, and the living below would be left with nothing but stories of how their queen had set herself alight against an unkillable storm. Drogon roared again, a note of pain in it this time. A patch of his left wing smoked where a tongue of blue flame had licked it moments before. The scales there had blackened, cracked. Daenerys felt the hurt in her own bones, the echo of his pain opening a raw wound in her chest. She pressed her forehead to his neck. "Just a little farther," she whispered. "Take me to what's left. I won't run forever, but I can't die here, not yet." As if in answer, the clouds below broke for an instant. She saw the King's Road, a pale line cutting through dark trees, heading south from Winterfell toward Moat Cailin. Tiny black dots moved along it. Too many for a lone band of refugees, too few for an army. The sight was gone a heartbeat later, swallowed by cloud, but the image seared itself into her mind. Her people, Jon's people, fleeing. "South," she said. "Follow the road. Keep above the clouds." Drogon obeyed, angling his body until his path matched the rough memory of the road below. Viserion did not emerge again. Either the undead dragon had lost sight of them in the storm, or the Night King had decided they weren't worth the chase. The possibility that he simply knew where they would go, that he'd seen every move she could make before she made it, gnawed at her. Daenerys didn't know how long they flew like that, half-blind, the sky a featureless gray. Time stretched and folded into itself, measured only by the burning of her muscles and the slowing cadence of Drogon's wings. At last, the storm thinned. Cloud became mist. Mist became drifting flakes. Below them, the land unfolded. Rolling hills dotted with copses of bare trees, frozen rivers gleaming faintly, the dark swath of the next swamps beginning in the south. Smoke rose from scattered holdfasts, tentative and small. Daylight filtered through the clouds, thin and bloodless. Drogon's wings faltered, then steadied. He was tired, Daenerys could feel it. His great body trembled under her hands. The cold had sunk into his bones as well as hers. "Rest," she murmured. "Soon, I promise." But rest could not be the first thing. Somewhere below, a column of northerners staggered toward a choke point that would not hold for long. Somewhere behind them, an army of the dead was marching. Somewhere above, for the first time since she had hatched her dragons, Daenerys Targaryen felt unsure if fire would ever be enough again. They stopped in the lee of an ancient barrow, a low rise in the land where centuries of snow and soil had swallowed a king's grave. The wind was less savage here, broken by the mound, but the cold still cut through cloth and leather with practiced ease. Fires sputtered in hastily dug pits, more smoke than flame. The wood they'd gathered was half frozen and green, but no one complained. They held their hands out anyway, as if gesture alone could conjure heat. Children tucked themselves into the crooks of parents' arms, eyes hollow. Sansa stood at the center of the camp, looking down at the map. It was little more than a torn scrap of parchment salvaged from Winterfell's war room, spread over a crate that had once carried salted fish. Her glove traced the crude ink line of the King's Road, from the stylized wolf's head that marked Winterfell down toward the thick black marks of Moat Cailin. "We're here," she said, tapping a point between the two. "If the dead move as fast as they did at Winterfell, they may already be halfway behind us." Tyrion leaned closer, squinting. "Assuming they pause at all," he said, "they have no need of sleep, or food, or boots, or hope," Davos added quietly. Tormund snorted, shaking ice from his beard. "Hope never killed a man," he said. "A spear through the gut now. That'll do it." Brienne's eyes stayed on the northern edge of the world drawn on the parchment, where the land turned to vague shapes and dots. "Moat Cailin," she said. "If we can hold it." "We can't," Davos interrupted, not unkindly. "Not for long. The neck is narrow, and the bogs will slow them. But this isn't an army of men we're stopping. They'll pile themselves into the mud until they make their own road." Tormund scratched at his scarred cheek. "The little frog folk there," he said. "Crannogmen. I've heard stories. Poison darts, arrows from nowhere, men who vanish when you look straight at them." "I know some of the stories," Sansa said. She had never met Howland Reed, the man who had fought beside her father at the Tower of Joy, but she knew his name, knew the weight it carried in whispered tales. The Reeds had never come to Winterfell in her childhood. They preferred their swamps and their secrets. If they're still alive, she thought. If anyone is south of here. "We can ask them to fight," she said. "We can't ask them to die for us." "They'll die either way," Tormund said. There was no cruelty in it, only blunt certainty. "If the dead pass the neck, they'll sweep the south clean, same as the north." Tyrion rubbed his gloved hands together, more for something to do than any hope of warmth. "Then we must assume Moat Cailin will fall," he said. "Which means this is not our last stand. It is our first retreat." Sansa looked up from the map. Her people moved in slow lines between tents and fires, wrapped in whatever they had saved. Patched cloaks, bits of armor, blankets that had once covered beds in Winterfell's guest quarters. They were tired in a way rest could not fix. Some of them had nothing left in the world but the clothes on their backs and the memory of a home now taken by winter. Retreat tasted like ashes. "We hold as long as we can," she said. "We send word ahead. We ask for boats from White Harbor, if it still stands. We cross the neck if we must, and we keep moving." "And south?" Davos asked. "You think the lords there will open their gates for a flood of half-starved northerners and a winter queen with dragons?" Sansa hesitated. Cersei's sneer flickered in her mind, the taste of sweet, poisoned wine on an innocent girl's tongue. The Reach was eating itself alive since the Tyrells had fallen. The Vale had followed her once, but she had no certainty they would again, not when winter itself marched behind her. "They won't have a choice," she said. "Not if they want to live." Tormund grinned, teeth white in his red beard. "Spoken like a proper queen now," he said. Sansa didn't flinch at the word this time. "I'm the Lady of Winterfell," she said. "Winterfell is gone. That leaves me with people and road. I'll make do." Above them, a shadow crossed the pale sky. Brienne's hand went to her sword. Others ducked, flinched, cried out. For a heartbeat, fear wrote dragonfire and blue flame across every face. Then Drogon roared, the sound rolling over the camp like thunder. He descended in a swirl of wind and snow, wings beating great gusts that sent sparks from the fires tumbling. Men stumbled, hands shielding their faces. Children gaped. The dragon landed beyond the barrow, claws sinking into the frozen earth, head lowering as he huffed steam. Daenerys slid from the saddle, her legs nearly giving way when she hit the ground. Grey Worm was already at her side. He must have ridden lower in the harness, his face pale beneath its mask of discipline. Sansa stepped forward, cloak whipping, chin high. Daenerys looked older than she had the last time Sansa had seen her in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Lines carved by cold and grief bracketed her mouth. Soot streaked her cheeks. Her eyes, though, were bright as ever, too bright. A feverish sheen born of sleepless hours and too much loss. "So," Daenerys said, voice rough, "we are running." "Moving," Sansa said, "until we find somewhere we can stand." "And if there is no such place?" Daenerys asked. "Then we keep moving," Sansa said, "until there is nowhere left." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, Winter Queen and Dragon Queen, their breath steaming between them. Drogon sniffed at the air, his great head swinging to regard the mass of northerners. Children shrank back. One little girl with dirty cheeks stepped closer, eyes wide, until her mother yanked her back with a hissed warning. Drogon huffed, a low rumble in his chest, and folded his wings, settling. "We'll talk inside," Tyrion said quietly. "If there were an inside." "There's a tent," Davos offered. "Canvas walls will have to do for a war." Sansa glanced at the barrow. "Men were buried here once," she said. "Kings before there were kingdoms. They fought their wars and lay down in the end. We can borrow their hill." Daenerys followed her gaze. For a heartbeat, something softened in her expression. "Let's plan how to keep the living from joining them," she said. The land changed as they moved south. Hills gave way to low, sodden ground. The snow, which had lain in smooth drifts in the bar rollins, turned patchy, interrupted by patches of brown water that steamed faintly in the cold. Stunted trees thrust out of the muck, their roots tangled and exposed, like fingers reaching for help that would never come. The neck was a place of half things, half land and half water, half forest and half bog. The wind smelled different here, less of ice and more of stagnant pools and slow decay. It was quieter too, the snow muffled not just by its own weight but by the mist that clung to everything. Ahead, Moat Cailin rose from the fog. It was no true castle, not anymore. Time and war had broken it, leaving only a handful of towers standing amid broken walls and flooded ditches. But its position was everything. The King's Road narrowed here until it was little more than a raised causeway above the bog, the only sure path for a large force. Smoke curled up from the towers. Banners hung, sodden but still visible, green and brown, marked with a black Crannogman's device. "They're here," Davos said. Relief threaded through his words. "Thank the gods. I was beginning to think the stories were just that. Stories." The column slowed as men appeared out of the mist. They were small, these swamp dwellers, wiry rather than broad, dressed in layers of leather and reeds that made them look like pieces of the marsh itself. Their spears were tipped with dragonglass and bone. Faces smeared with mud and ash regarded the northerners with flat, unreadable eyes. One of them stepped forward. He was older, his hair threaded with gray, his face deeply lined by weather and worry, yet there was nothing frail about him. His gaze was as sharp as a knife's edge, his movements fluid as water. In his bearing there was an echo of Ned Stark, not in looks, but in a certain unbending dignity. "Howland Reed," Sansa said, more a statement than a question. He inclined his head. "Lady Stark," he said. "Or is it Queen now? Hard to keep track, with so many crowns cracked in so few years." "I'm Sansa of House Stark," she said. "That's enough." His eyes flicked to Daenerys, to the dragon looming behind the column, to the battered ranks and exhausted faces. He nodded once, slowly. "The ravens came," he said. "Not many, but enough. We saw your fire in the north. We smelled the cold on the wind." "And Moat Cailin?" Davos asked. "Can it hold?" "For a time," Howland said. "The bogs are full of surprises for men who don't know them. The dead," he frowned. "I haven't hunted them before." "We have," Tormund said. "They don't frighten. They don't hesitate. You'll need more than tricks and fog." Howland's mouth quirked. "Tricks and fog are what we've got," he said, "plus a stubbornness older than the wall. It will have to do." Daenerys stepped forward, cloak dragging through the damp earth. "We need time," she said, "for ravens to reach the south, for ships, if there are any, to come, for people to decide whether they wish to live under my banner's protection, or die in their castles pretending the north is someone else's problem." "You ask for oaths in exchange for safety," Howland said. "That sounds like a bargain the north has heard before." She flinched just slightly. Sansa watched, filed it away. "I ask for swords," Daenerys said. "Oaths can come later, or not at all. Dead men don't swear fealty." Howland studied her a moment longer, then turned back to Sansa. "The neck will slow them," he said. "We've already flooded the low paths. We have archers in the reeds, spearmen who can strike from beneath the water. We'll make them pay for every step they take." "And if they don't drown?" Sansa asked. "Then we fall back," Howland said. "There are islands and hidden channels south of here. We know the ways. You don't. So listen when we tell you to move." He gestured, and boats emerged from the mist. Low craft made of woven reeds and wood slid silently along by poles. Crannogmen helped the most exhausted of the northerners aboard, guiding them with efficient, impersonal hands. "Your dragon will have to circle," Howland said to Daenerys. "The causeway can't take his weight, but he's welcome to burn anything that doesn't scream in the common tongue." Drogon snorted, folding his wings a little tighter, as if offended by the implication he might need permission. Sansa looked toward Moat Cailin, its broken towers looming out of the murk. Once, this had been an outpost of the First Men, a place where they'd held against invaders from the south. Now it would be the line between a dead north and still living lands beyond. "How long?" she asked. Howland followed her gaze. "A day," he said. "3. A week, if your dragons burn hot and the dead march slow." His eyes met hers. "It won't be enough," he said. "You know that." "Yes," Sansa said. "But it will be something. And in this winter, something would have to do." Far to the north of Moat Cailin, where the King's Road had long since disappeared beneath snow and rock, another band moved through the trees. Tormund Giantbane trudged at their head, his great red beard stiff with frost, his cloak little more than an icicle-rimmed pelt that had once belonged to a bear. The axe on his back dragged at his shoulders. His breath came in thick, plume-like clouds. Behind him walked men in black cloaks that no longer meant much, their vows scattered with their comrades along the length of the wall. A few still wore bits of armor, dented and hastily buckled on. Some carried spears, others nothing but sharpened sticks. Among them moved free folk in patchwork furs, faces hard with the knowledge that the world they had known had ended twice now. "South," Tormund grunted. "Keep moving south. If you fall, we leave you behind. Better to freeze than rise." He didn't add that they hadn't seen any fallen left on the ground for long. The dead didn't leave bodies behind. They collected. A baby fussed somewhere in the line. Gilly shushed little Sam, rocking him against her chest beneath layer upon layer of wool. The boy's cheeks were red, his eyes watering from the cold, but he didn't cry for long. It was as if even an infant understood there was no room for noise in this new world. Samwell Tarly stumbled beside them, one hand on Gilly's shoulder as much to guide himself as to steady her. His other arm wrapped around a bulging leather satchel that held, improbably, books. He had left Horn Hill with more, but had dropped them along the way as the weight became too much. These, he had told himself, were the ones he couldn't abandon. Knowledge that might still matter. Needle-sharp wind cut through his stolen black cloak. His toes were numb. His nose had stopped running hours ago. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad. He wanted to sit, to rest, to not see the hulking shapes moving between the trees in the distance. Too big and too quiet. Giants, he thought. Dead ones. "Do you think they're following us?" he asked Tormund, panting. Tormund snorted. "Think?" he said. "They don't think Sam the Slayer. They just go." Everything alive gets out of their way or under their feet. Sam clutched the satchel tighter. The wall. Gone, Tormund said bluntly. Fell like rotten ice. Saw it with my own eyes. You dreaming a new one on the way south? Sam fell silent. The wall had been there for 8,000 years, a fact that had sat in his mind like bedrock. Now that bedrock had cracked. The world felt like a table with one leg kicked out. If we reach the neck, Gilly said quietly, will they let us in? The Lord's there. Tormund barked a laugh that held no mirth. They'll let the dragon girl in, he said. Or the Sansa wolf. Or the one with the little fancy hands. He wiggled his fingers in a mocking imitation of Tyrion's gesturing. What about us? She pressed. Tormund's expression shifted, just for a moment. You go where the Slayer goes, he said. He's killed a White Walker. That's worth something, even down here. Sam opened his mouth to protest that he hadn't done it alone, that the old bear's ravens and the chaos of that night had done as much as his shaking hand. He closed it again. The title had grown around him like a cloak he wasn't sure he deserved, but he would wear it if it bought Gilly and the boy another night alive. A sound rolled through the forest then, a distant, heavy thudding, like slow thunder. The line halted. Tormund raised a hand, squinting into the trees. Between two trunks in the far distance, something moved. A shape too large to be a man, too deliberate to be ordinary wind. Another joined it, then another. 3 giants, their forms stitched with greenish ice, furs frozen to their bodies, club-like weapons dragging behind them, leaving deep grooves in the snow. Don't move, Tormund murmured. They see by motion like men see by light. Stay still, and the trees might hide us. Sam's every muscle screamed. Not moving took more effort than running. One giant paused, head turning slightly. Blue eyes glimmered between branches. Sam pictured Gilly's face, little Sam's tiny fingers. He pictured the Citadel's library, shelves stretching into infinity, and wondered if any of those books had ever truly prepared anyone for this. After a long, breathless moment, the giant moved on. The thudding grew fainter. Tormund exhaled slowly. South, he said again. Before they changed their mind. They resumed their march, slower now, more careful. The snow beneath their boots seemed suddenly thinner, the distance to the neck impossibly vast. Behind them, beyond the curtain of trees and the curve of the earth, winter followed. The first time the dead came into view at Moat Cailin, it was almost a relief. For days they had been in absence, a looming promise carried in ravens' tails and the changing air. Men stood on the broken towers, eyes watering from cold, staring north into fog, imagining legions that might already be at their throats. The waiting ate at them, gnawed more surely than hunger. Then, one morning as the pale sun fought its way through a low gray sky, the mist parted. They came in silence. On the King's Road, the vanguard appeared as a dark stain spreading along the narrow causeway. Whites in tattered mail, in peasants' rags, in no clothing at all, their skin mottled and cracked. Their eyes burned, but their mouths made no sound. Behind them shuffled more and more, until the road itself seemed made of moving bodies. In the bogs on either side, where the crannogmen had flooded the low ground, corpses waded waist-deep through the murky water. Some sank, their flesh sloughing from their bones, only to rise again further along. Arrows stuck in them like reeds. Hold, Howland Reed murmured from the shadow of a tower. Let them come closer. His archers waited, barely visible among the reeds. Faces smeared with mud, cloaks patterned like the swamp, bows drawn back. Their dragon-glass-tipped arrows quivered with tension. Sansa watched from the battlements, hands buried in the fur at her collar. The cold bit at her, but she barely felt it. Her eyes traced the line where the causeway met the broken gatehouse, where men of the north and the marsh stood with spears lowered. This is where we stop them, she thought, or where we learn there is no stopping. Daenerys' shadow swept over the walls before her roar reached them. Drogon wheeled in the air, his black form stark against the gray clouds. Flames licked at the corners of his jaws. Daenerys sat low in the saddle, hair whipped back, eyes narrowed against the wind and the stinging brightness of snow below. She had held herself back at Winterfell, terrified of roasting her own men along with the dead in the chaos of battle. Here, the field was clearer. The causeway was narrow. The bogs beyond were a killing ground she could turn to their advantage. "Dracarys," she hissed between her teeth. Fire poured from Drogon's mouth, washing over the right flank of the dead. The marsh boiled. Water flashed to steam, rising in great clouds that turned the air opaque. Whites flailed as their flesh blackened and sloughed, bones cracking in the sudden heat. For a moment, the dead faltered, their ranks churning. Then the Night Kings will push them on. Those on the causeway climbed over their burning fellows, shambling forward even as their clothes smoked. Those in the marsh sank, charred limbs thrashing, then rose again in different shapes. Fire killed them, but there were always more. "Now," Howland said calmly. Arrows flew. They arced from the reeds in a black cloud, their dragonglass points glinting. Where they struck skin, whites collapsed, limbs jerking. One by one, walkers made of more than mortal flesh shattered in bursts of ice. The first mile of the causeway became a slaughterhouse. Spears thrust, arrows fell, dragonfire roared. For every dead thing that toppled into the mire, 3 more stepped forward. Sansa's throat tightened. Her people fought like men and women who knew there was nowhere left to run. The crannogmen moved like ghosts, appearing from the water to stab a white's knee and vanish again. Daenerys's dragon screamed defiance at the unending tide. It was almost beautiful in a terrible way, a last, desperate stand amid fog and fire. And then she saw him, halfway down the causeway, framed by the press of bodies, walked a man she had known all her life and not at all. Dark hair, frost-streaked. Broad shoulders, a sword she recognized in his hand. Jon. His eyes, even at a distance, glowed impossible blue. Her breath caught. He's with them," she whispered. Tyrion stepped closer to the battlement, squinting. "Bloody hells," he said softly. "He was killed," Sansa said, words tumbling out as if by speaking them she might make them real again. "In the Godswood. Dany saw it. Arya. And now he walks," Davos finished grimly. "We knew they could do it. We just hoped it wouldn't be him." On the causeway, Jon moved with purpose, not sluggish like the Whites, nor regal and inhuman like the Night King. Something between. His steps were steady, his grip on Longclaw firm. Once he raised the sword, gesturing. The dead redirected themselves, surging more heavily toward a patch of reeds that hid a concentration of archers. He's leading them, Sansa thought, horror rising like bile. He's doing what he's always done, for someone else's cause. "Your Grace," Grey Worm said from Daenerys' side in the sky. His voice reached her through the rush of wind, the dragon's roar, the screaming of boiling bogs. "He is there." She saw him. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that figure. A man who had once been hers, who had whispered alliances and shared truths and doubts by firelight. The man who had chosen honor over love. The man she had called king, cousin, lover. Fire flared in her chest, hot enough to rival Drogon's. "Burn him," a part of her whispered. "End it. End him. Free whatever is trapped inside that broken shell." She could not. Drogon dipped lower, flames streaming over the dead to either side of Jon, never quite touching him. She burned the road in front of him, forcing the Whites to stumble through blackened, uneven ground. She seared the marsh to his left, creating a barrier of steam that momentarily cut him off from the bulk of the army. He kept coming. "Fall back," Howland shouted from below. "Second line. Fall back." Men scrambled, retreating up the causeway toward the inner ring of defenses. The dead surged to fill the gap. The first line of stakes and pits, hastily dug in the bog, collapsed under the weight of bodies, becoming merely another layer of corpses for their fellows to walk over. "Hold them," Sansa said, though there was no one close enough to hear. "Just a little longer." Ravens burst from the tower behind her, taking to the sky in a dark cloud. Messages tied to their legs fluttered. Appeals to White Harbor, to the Vale, to the Riverlands, to anyone who still had ears to hear. "We are here," she thought, watching Jon's inexorable approach. "We are here, and winter has arrived." Night came early that day. The sun slid behind a bank of thick clouds before it had reached its zenith, leaving the land in a gray dimness that felt more like the thinking pause between heartbeats than any rightful dusk. The dead did not slow when the light faded. If anything, the dark suited them. By the time the last living defenders of Moat Cailin slipped away into hidden channels guided by crannic boats, the causeway was a solid mass of bodies. Arrows no longer flew from the reeds. Dragonfire came less often. Drogon was exhausted, forced to withdraw to higher air to catch his breath. The Night Kings will pressed forward, relentless. Jon marched at the front of a column now, his cloak gone, his leather stiff with frost and blood. Longclaw hung at his side, the blade dull in the failing light. When the first line of wooden stakes finally shattered under the weight of the dead, he stepped over the splintered wood without breaking stride. He did not look down into the bogs where drowned wights clawed at roots, nor up at the towers where men had once stood. He did not look at the place where Sansa had watched him from the battlements, or at the sky where a dragon's shadow had once passed. Inside him, something beat. It was not a heart, not in the old sense. That organ had stuttered and failed when the ice spear pierced his chest. Yet deep in the quiet of his body, in the spaces the Night King's cold had not fully reached, there was a stubborn, flickering resistance. He saw flashes: a girl chasing cats through the Red Keep, a boy with a bastard scowl holding a needle-slim sword in the yard, a man in black on a high wall, wind whipping his hair as he looked out over endless ice, a hand on his shoulder, heavy and warm, a voice saying, "You are a Stark to me." Each image was a lantern in the fog, a brief flare of identity. Then the cold crashed over them like a wave. Every time he surfaced, it was harder. The Night King's will did not shout or rage. It simply pressed, implacable, turning every stray thought toward a single purpose: march, cut, kill, raise. Jon obeyed, because he had always been good at obedience. To Jeor Mormont, to Robb, to the vows he'd spoken before a heart tree, to the men who had stabbed him, to the woman whose dragons had burned half a field of wights at a word. Now he obeyed winter. They passed into the neck, the air growing damp, the ground beneath the snow treacherous. Some wights sank into hidden channels, vanishing with barely a ripple. Others clawed their way out, dragging themselves onward, fingers worn down to bone. Above, ravens watched from twisted branches, their black eyes reflecting a war older than any of the human banners below. Far to the south, on an island of black stone that had once belonged to dragons long gone, another war took shape. The map table on Dragonstone was lit by candles, their flames guttering in the drafts that prowled the old fortress. Shadows of carved mountains and rivers danced on the walls. Wooden lions, stags, roses, and krakens lay scattered where hands had pushed them aside. The dire wolf and dragon sigils sat side by side on the northern half of the table, swallowed almost entirely by a smear of white paint that had been hastily slopped across the carved north. "The ravens agree," Tyrion said, voice flat with tiredness. "The north is lost. Moat Cailin is delaying them, perhaps, but not stopping them." Sansa's fingers dug into the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Her eyes traced the line where the neck narrowed, the little carved towers that marked the bog fortresses. "My people are not numbers on a map," she said. "They're not smears of paint." "No," Tyrion said gently. "They're not. They are cold and hungry and terrified. If we fail here, they will be dead." Daenerys stood at the head of the table, both hands braced on either side of the carved narrow sea. She looked older here too, in the flickering light, shadows deepening the hollows beneath her eyes, the stubborn set of her mouth. "We call the remaining lords," she said. "Every house that still has men to muster. The Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, the Reach if there's anything left of it. Dorne. She lifted her gaze, meeting Sansa's. You hold sway with some of them. Use it. They won't come for me, Sansa said. Not for the girl they remember from King's Landing. They might for you, or for your dragons. They remember your brother, Davos said quietly. Robb, the young wolf. Half of them followed him once, until they didn't. Until they betrayed him, Sansa said. Until they drove knives into his heart at a wedding feast. Which means they know how quickly the wrong choice can kill them, Tyrion said. Fear can be as useful a spur as loyalty. Sansa looked back at the north on the table. The white smear swallowed old names: Winterfell, Last Hearth, Carhold. Only the wall, carved taller than scale, remained untouched by paint, an irony that made her throat ache. He's up there, she said. Jon. Daenerys flinched. We don't know that, Tyrion began. We do, she said. We saw him at Moat Cailin. The ravens from the Crannogmen spoke of a man leading the dead with a Valyrian steel sword. Who else would it be? She laughed once, bitterly. I always knew he'd die for the North. I just didn't think he'd keep going after. Silence settled. Daenerys straightened slowly. If there is anything of him left, she said, it is trapped, suffering. That is not mercy. You'd burn him, Sansa said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a weighing of facts. I would free him, Daenerys said. If I can. If I must. If I'm given the chance. And the Night King? Davos asked. Fire doesn't touch him now. We saw that with our own eyes. Steel doesn't do it. Dragonglass makes his lieutenants crack. Not him. Tyrion tapped the table thoughtfully. His finger landed on a cluster of carved trees around a lake in the Riverlands. The children made him, he said. So they say, or something like them. Old magic that men barely remember and never understood. If he's changed, so must the way we break him. The children are gone, Sansa said. The last of them died beyond the wall. Maybe not all of them, Tyrion said. And even if they are, their work remains. The weirwoods, the old places. We may need to look backward to go forward. Daenerys followed his finger. The Isle of Faces, she read from the carved script. The lake around it was etched with faint ripples, the island itself crowded with tiny stylized trees. A story, a rumor. So were dragons, Tyrion said, until they hatched on a pyre. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, seeing firelight on black scales, feeling heat that did not care about her grief. Very well, she said. We send for every lord who still cares to listen. We send riders to the Riverlands. We hold the line as long as we can in the neck and beyond. And we find out whether the old gods still listen. Sansa nodded slowly. If there's any chance, she said, any at all. On the map, the white smear crept southward day by day. In the real world, winter marched faster. North of them, across frozen rivers and dead fields, Jon Snow walked at the head of a column of the damned. The Night Kings will push him forward. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the ice, something else stirred. Remember, it whispered. But the wind was very cold, and the night was very long.